Listening to those comments is Professor Stephen Friedman, who joins us now. And Professor Friedman, I hope that you have heard some of what Herman Mashaba has had to say, that all you have done through this opinion piece that you wrote is an attempt to silence those that are speaking out against illegal immigration in the country. How do you respond?
Morning, Corey. You know, people who have prejudices always say this. It's very common around the world. If you disagree with us, you're silencing us. I'm not silencing him. He's got all sorts of platforms. He's got a platform on your outlet and in every other media outlet on the country, and he's also a public figure. What I'm pointing out is the consequence of what he says in public. And he's not the only one. The ANC does it, the DA does it, the EFF does it, and he does it. And, you know, if you live in a free society and you point out to people the consequences of what they say, then they say to you, well, we're trying to silence you. I'm not trying to silence him. I'm pointing out to him that he's whipping up prejudice against people because they happen to be born in another place. And that's clearly true. It's been his position all along. But I repeat, it's the whole political party spectrum at the moment. In the article you mentioned, I quote things that ANC people have said. I discussed the DA. The EFF is at the moment claiming that it's going around checking up whether people are employing foreign people or not. So it's our whole political class are sending out messages to the society that people who happen to be born in another country are a problem. And all the evidence we have from mounds of research shows that they're not a problem. You know, there's none of the prejudices against foreigners actually stand up when you look at the research, not one of them.
Professor Friedman, I'm going to get to just some of what you have had to write in this piece because it's quite strong. But I want to pick up on what you've just said, that research suggests that most of the things that foreign nationals are blamed for simply does not stand up to the kind of sentiment that is stacked against them right now, including sometimes the attacks that we have seen against foreign nationals in the country. The question I want for you, though, to deal with are South Africans who will say, just the other day, in fact, I think it was last year, there's a man of Zimbabwean origin who was arrested and he pleaded guilty in Limpopo province for killing, I think it was in excess of at least 5 women, if not more. That is the kind of sentiment that some South Africans rally under to say, this is what we mean when we say illegal migrants come into the country, they commit crimes, but because they're not documented, fingerprints are difficult to trace and those people can easily move out of the country. So when you say that they are not to blame for the things that they are said to be responsible for, some people will bring up specific cases like that one and say, but what are you talking about?
Yes, they always do bring them up, Corey, but that's not the point. I'm not saying that nobody from another country commits a crime. That would be clearly false. People from other countries do commit crimes here. But that's not the issue. The issue is, do they commit any more crimes than South Africans do? Is our crime problem an immigrant problem? Do we have a high crime rate because we have people from other countries? And the answer is clearly no. You know, some years ago, the people who were responsible for South African Police Service statistics used to claim in every single statistical outlet they put out that foreigners caused more crime than South Africans. And some of us who were involved in research on this issue called them out on this and said, what is your evidence? And they admitted they have no evidence. So then they started to say, no, it's not true that foreigners cause more crime than South Africans, but foreigners come here and they consume our resources and that makes South Africans poor and that causes the crime. So that's how prejudice works. You know, if you take the example of a Zimbabwean man who commits a gruesome crime, and you don't talk about all the South Africans who commit gruesome crimes. And the real question for us as a society is this the cause of our problems? So I've dealt with the crime issue. Let's take something else which is topical and has been in the news over the last week. It has now become absolutely routine for any politician in this country who is in charge of a health service to say that the problem is that we have masses of migrants in our hospitals. They never produce any evidence to show that this is true. And I'm afraid any South African who believes that the problems in our health service are caused by the fact that we have migrants hasn't been paying attention for the last 20 years, because these problems are very deep-rooted. We've had them for a long time. And you see, the problem, Polly, is if we always blame the migrants for this, we never actually address our problems, because then you can shrug it off and say, well, it's the fault of the migrants, so I, as the MEC, don't have to fix the health service, because I can always blame it on people who everybody dislikes and, who are not going to answer back.
Prof, let's tackle, and I'm glad that you've swayed the discussion towards other issues apart from crime. Let's then talk about what you say in the article is that the threats against migrants have become a national emergency. Someone will retort and say what is a matter of emergency in the country is the state of the economy, because the migrants that are in South Africa are economic migrants in large part, and that is why they are found in major provinces where there is economic activity. How would you respond to that?
Yes, of course there are lots of economic migrants, Corey. That's how a lot of strong societies and strong economies get built. There are places around the world who build their economy on getting in the skills they need. I mean, one of the ridiculous aspects of life in South Africa today is that we know that we have an immigration problem. We know that people with qualifications leave this country. Now, surely if people with qualifications are leaving this country, the sensible thing to do if you want the skills you need is to allow in people from other countries who want to come here who have those skills, which are sorely needed in this country. But the atmosphere that the politicians have created in this country at the moment means that we have a problem and we chase away the solution. That can't be a reasonable thing to do. There's nothing wrong with a person moving from one place to another because they see an economic opportunity. What you have to show, if you claim it's bad for South Africa, is that they're taking things away from South Africans that South Africans would have had. And the evidence just doesn't support that. In the main, on balance, people from other African countries contribute to this country. They don't take things away. It's incidentally worth noting here, one of the ridiculous aspects of this whole conversation, I'm not talking about our conversation, I'm talking about the national conversation we're having at the moment, is that you get accused of all sorts of things when you raise these issues, and you get accused of having contempt for what South Africans feel. I mean, who invented South Africa in the first place? South Africa wasn't created by Ushaka or by Mthilikazi or by Moshesh. It was created by a bunch of white people who came here to colonize us. The difference, that poor man who died last night in Diepsloot, who was from Zimbabwe, the difference between him and the people who killed him is some border that some white colonists erected decades ago. Why do we suddenly believe that people who are the wrong side of that border, in inverted commas, are people who are taking things away from us rather than people who are contributing to it?
You're raising a very interesting conversation, which leads directly to one of the points you raised, Professor, to say the targeting of migrants is the new racism, because this is essentially a war against the impoverished, as well as people against whom they are being bullied, and essentially they don't have ways to defend themselves. And your point comes, interestingly, on the back of what we saw yesterday, the EFF marching against what they say was the arrival of the 1962, or should I say 1652 rather, was the arrival of the Boers in South Africa. And quite interesting that that approach is being taken on the back of the EFF having gone to restaurants to go and see the ratio of migrants who are employed there versus the people of South Africa. Where do you place the EFF right now in this spectrum?
You see, there's something quite interesting about the EFF's attitude to this problem. And that is that, quite frankly, to me, it shows that among the politicians of all parties, there's a great deal of opportunism at the moment. Because the interesting thing about the EFF is that not so long ago, the EFF was the only political party in this country, or certainly the only major political party, which was saying the opposite, which was saying what was consistent with what they said in Stellenbosch yesterday, which is that, Africa was colonized by Europeans. Africans have a great deal in common, and we ought not to be persecuting people because they come from a different part of Africa. The EFF has now totally changed its tune. And why has it changed its tune, I believe? Because it's the easy option, which is the point I keep on making. Because if you say what the EFF is saying now, then you get, then people cheer you. I'm not talking about the majority of people, but I'm talking about the people in the debate. If you say what the EFF was saying before, then you're given a hard time. So it's not as if, and I'm singling out the EFF precisely because they've changed their position. I often wonder, whether Minister Motsoaledi or Deputy President Mabuza or any of the other people from political parties who do this actually believe what they say. Because it's such a convenient thing to do. To blame every problem that there is on people who can't really answer back or aren't listened to when they answer back, that it just becomes this easy option for politicians. And I'm afraid the EFF at the moment is totally contradicting itself. And I suspect it's doing that because it thinks that's where the political advantage lies at the moment.
Professor Stephen Friedman, thank you very much for your time and insights there.